So we're gonna go over pre-exhausting as a technique today. So whenever we think about pre-exhausting, I think that most people immediately go into supersets. So I want to go from flies into bench press. I want to go from tricep pushdowns into skull crushers. I want to go from leg curls into stiff leg deadlifts. There's a lot of ways to do this. Essentially, pre-exhausting is making the muscle tired and then doing the heavier or primary movement. So it can be a superset, but I want to think of it more as like a full ideology or full component or technique today, and we can just expand off of that. So again, what we're doing here is we are taking a movement as our primary movement, we're shuffling that a little bit further down in our sequencing of priority, and instead we are trying to fatigue that primary muscle, fatigue our target muscle before that primary movement. So let's give the example of a high bar barbell squat as our primary movement of today. So that is gonna be a quad focused movement. We're really gonna try and overload our quads there. Well, how do we go about pre-exhausting before that, and why would we do so? So how to do that, maybe we take an isolation movement like a leg extension here, and we do a few sets to close to failure, really get our quads pumped, exhausted, fatigued, and then we go into our high bar squats, and our load is going to be artificially limited because we are a little bit fatigued there. So why would we want to artificially limit the amount of load that we're able to use? Well, one of the biggest reasons is maybe we have an injury. So maybe we have a pre-existing injury that actually is going to be exacerbated by using a high amount of load on something like a squat. Think of knee injury. So if someone has knee tendonitis, it would make a lot of sense for them to go in, do a single joint or isolated movement that feels okay on their knees before going into a heavier compound movement that might be a little bit more strenuous. That would be one reason. Another reason would be maybe we are actually extremely glute dominant in a squat pattern, but we really want to bring up our quads. So in that capacity, we could go in, we could hit our quads first, fatigue them, and then whenever we go over into our high bar squat pattern, we could expect that our quads would be the failure point before our glutes. So we would want that. We would want to do that. We would want to actually prioritize our quads first in our training session so that as we get into our later heavier work, we actually are able to focus and prioritize our muscle that we are, maybe a little bit weaker on or trying to bring up. So for leg extensions here, again, using this as our example, we would go through our 2, 3, 4, however many sets. Maybe we even add in intensity techniques, but the key here is that before we go into our primary movement of the day, or primary movements, we would need to take this movement to some state of exhaustion. So we had to go into the later movements being fatigued already, because that is what the pre-exhaustion technique is asking for, and that's what that requires. So again, few reasons why we would use this. It doesn't have to be exclusive to supersets. It can be just a state of going from lighter, more focused movements into more general movements, but we want to work around injuries potentially. We want to focus on a specific muscle group. And in general, it's a really, really great way as well to add in additional volume without adding in a ton of extra fatigue. So pre-exhaustion as a technique, as a generalized technique rather than just a very, very specific one, great way to potentially add in some additional components to your programming. But again, there are drawbacks. Understand what the drawbacks are. Make sure that you're weighing your pros and cons before adding this in. But if you really want to bring up a weak body part or you want to work around some injuries, pre-exhausting is a potentially great way to do so.